US-Brazil relations have always been a complex and evolving story, marked by periods of close collaboration and moments of significant discord. These two nations, giants in their respective hemispheres, have navigated a path filled with both promise and peril. A mix of cooperation and tension, a delicate dance on the world stage where mutual interests often clash with differing ideologies and national ambitions. The relationship is a tapestry woven with threads of trade, security, and cultural exchange, but also strained by political disagreements and economic competition. Shaped by the personal and political dynamics of their leaders, each administration bringing its own approach and priorities to the table. The tone and direction of US-Brazil relations can shift dramatically depending on who occupies the presidential offices in Washington and Brasilia. Under Trump and Bolsonaro, a unique chapter unfolded. The two countries enjoyed a period of close alignment, a rare convergence of political ideologies and strategic interests that fostered a sense of camaraderie and partnership. Driven by shared right-wing populist agendas and personal rapport, creating a bond that transcended traditional diplomatic protocols, this alignment led to increased cooperation on various fronts, from trade to security. This era of mutual praise gave way to friction, as the political landscape shifted once again, when Biden and Lula took office, ushering in a new era of uncertainty and readjustment in the relationship. Each bringing new priorities, Biden emphasizing democracy and climate, setting a different course for American foreign policy, and signaling a departure from the previous administration's approach. Lula, pushing for Brazil's independence on the world stage, seeking to assert Brazil's role as a major global player and diversify its alliances beyond the United States. Tensions grew over issues like the war in Ukraine and Brazil's ties with China, revealing fundamental differences in their foreign policy orientations and strategic calculations, cooling the once warm relationship and casting a shadow of doubt over the future of US-Brazil cooperation. The pragmatic engagement that followed, while maintaining a semblance of normalcy, was marked by suspicion and diverging interests, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and mistrust between the two nations. These shifting alliances and ideological divides, coupled with growing economic competition, set the stage for a trade dispute, a seemingly minor disagreement that would soon escalate into a major crisis. That would quickly escalate into a diplomatic crisis, threatening to unravel years of carefully cultivated relations. The groundwork was laid for confrontation, with both sides digging in their heels and preparing for a protracted struggle, with both sides ready to defend their interests, even at the cost of damaging the overall relationship. Understanding this backdrop is key to fully appreciate the complexities and nuances of the unfolding crisis, to grasping how the crisis of 2025 erupted so quickly, and why it proved so difficult to resolve. The trade conflict began quietly in April 2025 when the US imposed new tariffs on Brazilian exports like steel, ethanol, and processed meats, citing unfair subsidies. Brazil's government condemned the move as protectionist and vowed to challenge it at the WTO. The US insisted the tariffs were necessary to protect American industries, while Brazil saw them as politically motivated. Tensions simmered as Brazilian exporters faced new costs and US lobbyists defended the measures. Diplomatic efforts stalled, with both sides refusing to budge. Brazilian industry groups warned of job losses and called for retaliation. The dispute remained unresolved, with communication breaking down and trust eroding. The stage was set for escalation, as neither side wanted to appear weak. The initial spark was left to smolder, waiting for a political event to ignite a larger crisis. The groundwork for a full-blown confrontation was in place. July 2025 marked a turning point. Tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted, plunging Brazil and the United States into a diplomatic crisis. The month began with cautious optimism, but quickly spiraled into a period of intense uncertainty and escalating conflict. The flashpoint was the US government's unexpected announcement of sweeping 50% tariffs. This decision sent shockwaves through the Brazilian economy and ignited a firestorm of political controversy. These tariffs targeted Brazil's key exports, most notably coffee, a cornerstone of the Brazilian economy. Orange juice, another vital export, was also heavily impacted. And soybeans, a critical agricultural commodity, faced the same punitive measures. The economic implications were immediately clear: a significant blow to Brazil's trade balance and potential hardship for its agricultural sector. The US justified the move with an official statement citing concerns. They linked it directly to Brazil's ongoing prosecution of former President Bolsonaro, a controversial figure both domestically and internationally. The U.S. claimed these tariffs were necessary due to concerns over judicial politicization within the Brazilian legal system. This justification was met with skepticism and outrage in Brazil. This unprecedented intervention in Brazil's internal affairs was widely seen in Brazil as blatant political blackmail, an attempt to strong-arm the Brazilian government. It was perceived as a direct attack on national sovereignty, a violation of Brazil's right to self-determination. The tariffs inflamed Brazil's already polarized political landscape, deepening existing divisions and creating new fault lines. The move fueled widespread claims of foreign interference in domestic affairs, further eroding trust in international relations. The timing of the announcement just before a crucial court ruling that could determine Bolsonaro's political future made the move even more provocative, raising suspicions about the U.S. quote. As true motives, critics accuse the U.S. of attempting to exert undue influence over Brazil's judiciary, undermining its independence. The perception was that the U.S. was trying to protect a political ally and manipulate the legal process. The trade dispute had now become inextricably linked with Brazil's internal political crisis, creating a complex and volatile situation. What began as a manageable disagreement over trade had rapidly escalated into a full-blown national emergency, demanding immediate attention from the highest levels of government. The U.S. had crossed a significant diplomatic red line, damaging the relationship between the two countries. This action escalated the conflict far beyond the realm of trade, pushing it into a dangerous territory of political and diplomatic confrontation. The crisis was no longer just about economics, it was now fundamentally about sovereignty, the rule of law, and the integrity of Brazil's democratic institutions. Days after the tariff shock, the U.S. imposed personal sanctions, visa bans, on top Brazilian judges overseeing the Bolsonaro cases. The U.S. accused them of undermining democracy, but in Brazil, this was seen as a direct attack on judicial independence. Outrage swept across Brazil's political spectrum, uniting even critics of the government in defense of national institutions. The move was unprecedented and interpreted as an attempt to intimidate Brazil's judiciary. Legal associations and civil society condemned the U.S. action as an intolerable assault on sovereignty. The conflict had shifted from trade to a direct confrontation over Brazil's legal system. President Lula faced mounting pressure to respond forcefully. The U.S. gambit backfired, solidifying Brazilian opposition and rallying the nation around the principle of judicial independence. The stakes had never been higher. President Lula responded with defiance, framing the U.S. actions as an attack on all Brazilians, not just his administration. In a televised address, he condemned the tariffs and sanctions as imperialist, and vowed Brazil would not be intimidated. The crisis became a rallying point, uniting political rivals, business leaders, and civil society behind Lula. Even opposition lawmakers stood with the president in defense of national sovereignty. Lula's government recalled its ambassador from Washington and launched a global diplomatic campaign, seeking support from the UN, OAS, and BRICS. The message: this was a fight for all nations' independence from superpower pressure. Internally, Lula projected strength, meeting with judicial and congressional leaders to show unity. He promised support for affected industries, turning the crisis into a platform to consolidate his leadership. The U.S. pressure campaign had backfired, strengthening Lula's hand at home. Brazil was now united in defiance. The economic fallout was immediate. Coffee prices in the U.S. soared over 30%, and orange juice costs spiked as Brazil's exports were hit with massive tariffs. American consumers faced higher prices at breakfast, while U.S. food companies scrambled to absorb costs or pass them on. For Brazilian exporters, the U.S. market was suddenly closed, threatening billions in revenue and thousands of jobs. Farmers and agribusinesses in Brazil faced a crisis with investments frozen and uncertainty spreading. American industries reliant on Brazilian goods also suffered, unable to easily replace key imports. The threat of Brazilian retaliation loomed, worrying U.S. farmers who feared losing access to Brazil's market. The trade war exposed the deep interdependence of the two economies. Both sides were now feeling the pain, with no easy way out. The conflict's economic costs were mounting fast. The crisis pushed Brazil closer to China and the BRICS bloc, accelerating a shift in the hemisphere's balance of power. China and Russia quickly backed Brazil, condemning U.S. actions as economic coercion and offering diplomatic support. Brazil leveraged this support, calling for BRICS solidarity and reducing its reliance on the U.S. Other Latin American nations watched warily, seeing the US response as a warning of what could happen to them. The episode damaged US credibility in the region and gave China an opening to expand its influence. Inter-American institutions like the OAS were caught in the crossfire, unable to mediate effectively. The crisis exposed deep divisions and weakened regional cooperation. The US risked losing its dominant role in Latin America. The geopolitical landscape was shifting, with long-term consequences. As of July 19, 2025, the situation has reached a critical juncture. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks will have far-reaching consequences, impacting not only the economies of Brazil and the United States, but also the broader geopolitical landscape. The crisis stands at a crossroads. Two distinct paths lie ahead, each fraught with its own set of challenges and potential rewards. The choice between these paths will determine the future of the relationship between these two powerful nations. The most logical step, and the one that offers the greatest potential for a positive outcome, is a return to negotiations. A renewed commitment to dialogue and compromise is essential to de-escalate the situation. But public pride and deeply entrenched political stakes make compromise a difficult uphill battle. Both sides are under immense pressure to stand their ground and defend their interests, making concessions seem like a sign of weakness. If talks fail to gain traction, Brazil has indicated it will pursue a formal case with the World Trade Organization. But that process is notoriously slow, often taking years to reach a resolution, and offers no immediate relief to the current tensions. The wheels of international justice turn slowly, and the immediate crisis demands a more rapid response. Retaliation is, unfortunately, a very real and likely possibility, with Brazil actively considering the imposition of tariffs on a range of US goods, a move that would undoubtedly escalate the trade conflict. Furthermore, there's the potential for Brazil to favor non-American companies in future government contracts, further disadvantaging US businesses. Both governments are facing intense internal pressure from various factions. Lula is under pressure to project an image of strength and resolve on the international stage, while the US government is facing calls to vigorously protect its domestic industries and maintain its global standing as a leader in international trade. The ongoing outcome of Bolsonaro's trial adds another layer of complexity to the situation and could further inflame existing tensions, or conversely, it could potentially offer a path toward de-escalation, depending entirely on the final verdict and its implications. The looming risk of a full-blown tit-for-tat trade war is becoming increasingly palpable, threatening to inflict even deeper and more widespread economic damage on both nations, with potential ripple effects across the global economy. Beyond trade, long-standing security cooperation initiatives and crucial diplomatic ties are also now at significant risk of being undermined. The next strategic moves made by both sides will ultimately shape not just the future of trade relations, but the entire complex and multifaceted relationship between Brazil and the United States for years to come. The entire world is watching with bated breath, hoping to see if cooler heads will ultimately prevail and a mutually acceptable resolution can be found. The future of this vital partnership hangs precariously in the balance at this critical moment in history. The events of July 2025 have pushed US-Brazil relations to the brink. What began as a trade dispute has become a crisis over sovereignty, judicial independence, and global alignment. The US gamble, massive tariffs and sanctions, united Brazil in opposition and handed Lula a political victory. Economic pain is spreading, but the long-term damage to trust and regional stability may be even greater. The crisis risks pushing Brazil further into China's orbit and weakening US influence in Latin America. The choices made now will shape the hemisphere's future for years to come. The world is watching and waiting for a resolution.